So I don't know about you, but I think probably my favorite season of quarantine, if there were even seasons in quarantine, was the one where everyone suddenly started watching Avatar The Last Airbender again. It was incredible. Confessedly, I had never even seen Avatar The Last Airbender until this massive fad hit. I had had thousands of people, well, maybe hundreds of people, dozens of people tell me that I needed to watch Avatar and I just never got around to it. I think I definitely have a character flaw that I'm not proud of, which is that if a show is not in like the current discourse and being talked about and I can't like talk about it with others, it's very hard for me to go back and watch it on my own. It just feels so lonely, man. And so it was good that this great show suddenly gained prominence again and everyone was able to sort of share in it together. I thought it was a really awesome communal experience. I'm definitely someone who, whenever something gains prominence, whether it's, a story or a piece of media or even a movement, whenever something becomes talked about and flocked to by a lot of different types of people, I always think that's interesting. I mean, certain people would say that whatever is the most popular thing is automatically bad. And sometimes that's true. Like the Transformers movies sure make a lot of money and they're pretty terrible. But at the same time, I don't know, when you see something that a lot of people are getting really passionate about, I find it difficult to dismiss that. And so when something like Avatar takes sudden prominence in the culture again, I go, what's the thing? Like, what is everyone being drawn to about this? I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who would say that the character of Uncle Iroh in Avatar is not one of their favorites by far. Definitely one of my favorites. I love Iroh. He's awesome. Everyone loves him. There were all kinds of TikToks about Uncle Iroh over the summer. I listened to an Uncle Iroh chill hop beat whenever I was studying. So I think the character of Uncle Iroh is really key to the Avatar discussion. People talk about him all the time, probably more so than Aang even, really. And it was really interesting to me that he became such a popular figure over summer of 2020 because he's an old man. Like, how is that relevant to the young people of today? The thing that made this even more intriguing for me was that summer of 2020 had lots of crazy things going on, but one of the biggest things was Avatar The Last Airbender, and then another one of the biggest things that I think was hitting its peak during that summer was the OK Boomer fad, right? Everyone was saying OK Boomer, people were making boomer jokes. It was sort of a thing to talk about the failures of boomers, how much boomers have ruined society, and how their opinions have become so invalid to all the discussions going on right now. There are good things and bad things about that, which we could get into, but the thing that had me really interested was the fact that you've got this massive movement of young people who are tired of old people and their stupid opinions, and yet at the same time, the young people are flocking towards this character who is an old man, and they love him. The thing that started to cement this for me was that I started to see lots of memes about how Uncle Iroh was like the only boomer we could trust, or like Iroh is the only good boomer, that kind of thing, and I thought it was hilarious. But let's rewind a bit. I think outside of even the boomer context, Uncle Iroh is a really interesting mentor character to begin with because he doesn't necessarily fit the mold of the most frequently seen mentor characters in fantasy franchises. One of the most common traits of mentors in fantasy shows, in fantasy books, in fantasy movies, in the hero's journey monomyth, is that the mentor dies, right? Like, the mentor is supposed to dispense their wisdom to the hero from an ivory tower, and then they pass on, or they leave the picture, or they are killed, and the hero then has to learn to make what they will of that wisdom themselves on their own 2 feet. Iroh doesn't really fit that mold as a mentor, He stays alive throughout the whole show. He fights with the good guys at the end of the show, and he stays mentoring the person that he's mentoring, his nephew, throughout the whole show. Another thing that I think Iroh subverts about the typical mentor is that he's not got this squeaky clean, perfect reputation or past, He started off fighting for the bad guys, and now he's become this far more complex person who has changed from who he was. What this says to me, and maybe this relates back to the boomer idea, is that I think young people are attracted more to mentors who are not perfect, but still have wisdom to be dispensed. And I think there are a lot of other things that Iroh represents in what young people want in a mentor. And maybe that's how we can get into sort of the boomer discussion. I would say by far my favorite Uncle Iroh quote is the one where he says, "We must find wisdom in many different places." Just play the quote.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.
That's in the episode where he's training Zuko to wield lightning, which he learned from the Water Tribe. And I really love what he says about how we need to take wisdom from all four tribes and how they all get something right. And I think one of the interesting things about how he approaches that is that he's not saying that like truth is relative or they all have it exactly right or something like that. All he's saying is that there's wisdom to be found in a lot of different places. And I think in many ways, that's one of the first things that made me go, that really appeals to me. And I think that idea appeals to a lot of young people today too. The idea of an older person seeking wisdom in many different places feels very novel because I think in many of our lives, at least here in America, the old people in our lives don't seek wisdom in lots of different places. They seek wisdom from Fox News or they seek wisdom from Facebook, and that's it. And they stay within their bubble and judge truth to be true based on whether it comes out of that bubble or not. This might be too personal of an example, but hey, I'm trying to be personal on the channel. I'm a Christian. I'm a person of faith. I go to church. And I've done a lot of reading and studying in recent years about why young people today are leaving the church. And I think there are a lot of good reasons that they are. One of the most common factors that you find among why young people leave the church that, you know, if you distill all of the many factors into one sort of common reason I have found is that they feel that the church does not see God or spirituality or truth outside of the walls of the church. They feel that there's all of this beauty and truth outside of the church, and the church doesn't see that. They expect you to stay within their bubble. Bottom line on this rabbit trail is that I think the church actually has a lot to learn from Uncle Iroh in that sense, because we tend to see things through our lens and say, all right, does it align with this? Oh, then it's not true. Or does it come from this person who's already a Christian? Oh, well, then it's not true. Rather than, you know, what I've tried to do throughout a lot of my life, at least, you know, unsuccessfully sometimes, successfully other times, has been to see truth wherever it is found and say, oh, yeah, that's like, that can be true even if it doesn't come from a person who has the same worldview as me. I think one of the reasons that I have stayed in my faith, I don't know why I put quotation marks around that, my faith as long as I have, is that I have been able to see God and see truth in many different places outside of explicitly the church. You know, sometimes I've seen it in the church, but other times I've seen it in movies. Movies have been hugely true for me and spoken lots of truth into my life. So I think that's one of the ways in which Iroh counters boomerism is by finding wisdom and truth in many different places. I found that very refreshing. I think lots of young people find that very refreshing because I'm sure that lots of people have boomers in their life who refuse to accept a truth if it comes from CNN, or refuse to accept a truth if it comes from the channel that they don't watch, or refuse to accept a truth if it comes from a person of color or an LGBT person or whatever, right? And I think the thing that is so appealing about Iroh is that he doesn't fall for that. Another thing I think that Iroh doesn't fall for is the illusion of division. And that's, I think, another aspect that is so refreshing about his character. I love the fact that throughout the entire Avatar 3-season arc, the Water Tribe and the Fire Nation are at war and all the different tribes are fighting each other and everything. And Iroh does not give a rip about any of it. He talks to everyone, he befriends everyone, and he doesn't fall for any of the division that everyone else is falling for, which I think is so compelling. He is a wildly empathetic character, which is awesome. And I think that's another area in which, as sort of that anti-boomer archetype, he is so refreshing, because I think a lot of us have boomers in our lives or have seen boomers who fall for those illusions of division so easily. You know, it's so clear that, you know, they're obsessed with the culture war and the tribalism and the us and them politics. And again, if something comes out of that bubble that they don't like, it must not be true. An important thing to note there, I think, is that it's not that Iroh is not willing to take a stand or not willing to take a side. He does take sides by the end of the show. But I think it's that more on an individual relational level, he doesn't let those sides keep him from empathizing with the person that he's talking to, keep him from seeing them as a fascinating stranger. You know, on that note of taking sides, I think it's ironic that one of the most satisfying moments in the whole show is when we see all the old characters team up to fight the bad guys. You know, the whole White Lotus thing, and they all fight the Fire Nation, and Iroh burns the Fire Nation banners and everything. It's glorious. And I think it's so funny that that is a moment that young people cheer for. It's like, yes, all the old people teamed up and fought the bad guys. And it's so, you know, I wish that old people could watch Avatar and see the ways in which, like, it's like, that's what we want you to be. We want you to fight for justice. I think that probably stands in stark contrast to many of the boomers we know who seem very obsessed with their own personal experiences, refuse to venture outside their comfort zone, and don't want to take a stand for anything unless it's going back to the way things were, right? But all of this sort of falls short, I think, of the thing that people love the most about Iroh's character, which is his capacity for change and forgiveness. I think Iroh is a character who is defined in many ways by the fact that he has changed from the man he was back in the day. Right? He served the bad guys back in the day, and now he's had a change of heart. And even that in itself is a compelling thing to see in an older character. You know, I think we often see lots of mentor characters who have been old and wise and good as long as we've known them as characters or as long as they've been alive. And even in our own lives, I feel like many of us know boomers who have not changed their minds about anything in darn near 20 years. Man, I did not intend to use the word darn in this video, but there it was. So Iroh is very much a person who has changed and who continues to change throughout the show, which is something that you don't see in very many mentor characters. They tend to be very one note. But then also I think one of the things that makes him so compelling and so beautiful as a character is the fact that he's so forgiving of his nephew. You know, one of the most heartbreaking and heartwarming moments in the whole show is when Zuko is apologizing to him and crying and everything because he got him put in jail. And then Iroh just embraces him and tells him that he was just sad that he lost his way. I think that aspect of forgiveness in Iroh's character goes beyond just that one moment of embrace. You know, he's a character who is constantly forgiving throughout the whole show. It's an ongoing process where he continues to walk with his nephew and stay by his side even when he's being an absolute brat. And that's the way that Iroh really differentiates himself from other mentor characters, I believe, because rather than sitting on an ivory tower and dispensing his wisdom and then letting, you know, Zuko handle it himself, he actually walks with Zuko and journeys with him and stays by his side throughout the whole show. And that's one of the most compelling things about him as a mentor. He's not even really a mentor or a wise sage. He's a friend. He's a sidekick. He's a coach, you know? I think that does appeal in many ways to young people because we don't see that very often. So many boomers and old people today tend to take the position that millennials and Gen Z just need to do everything on their own and they need to get out of their comfort zone and get out of their mom's basement and go get a job and pay for college themselves and everything, despite the fact that monetarily things are a lot harder for young people today than they were back when they were our age. And you know, I think that's another way in which Iroh differentiates himself from the boomer mindset because he doesn't tell Zuko, oh, go do it yourself. Iroh's whole mindset, his whole ethos is all about the fact that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to let the ones who love you take care of you and look out for you.
There is nothing wrong with letting people who love you help you. Not that I love you. I just met you.
So Iroh is a character who is deeply empathetic, he's deeply loyal, and he's also deeply forgiving, not just in those singular moments of forgiveness, but in this forgiveness that is an ongoing process that lasts throughout the entire journey. He sticks by his nephew's side, even when Zuko doesn't think he needs him or wants him. So that's a way in which I think Iroh really appeals as that anti-boomer archetype. But I also think it's somewhat encouraging and beautiful and refreshing even that young people like this character who is defined so heavily by change and forgiveness. There are plenty of valid criticisms that you could make of boomers that don't necessarily apply to Gen Z nearly as much. But I don't know if that's necessarily true of the components of change and forgiveness. You know, lots of us definitely have boomers in our lives who either refuse to change or expect us to change when they won't change themselves, or won't forgive us for doing things that they disagree with. And yet at the same time, Gen Z struggles with change and forgiveness in equal regard, maybe even sometimes more. Sometimes we don't let people change. We have a tendency to cancel people. Even if they've changed long ago, it's like, oh, you did this thing in your past. Sorry, you're invalid now. I hate using the word cancel because it has so many different meanings and has often been corrupted by Fox News. But at the same time, it is true that young people today tend to be very dismissive and invalidating of people who they find have checkered pasts or made mistakes in the past, and they tend to dogpile on those people. In the same regard, we can often be very unforgiving of other human beings if they don't live up to our standards of wokeness or our standards of unproblematic or our standards of how you can be a true fan or something like that, right? We're not very forgiving as a generation, and maybe that's just a human thing. The thing that is beautiful about all of this to me, though, is the fact that Iroh represents the idea that young people still know that change and forgiveness are good things that we want. More so than that, I've seen countless young people say, oh, I want to be like Uncle Iroh when I'm older. And certainly I do too, right? And that's a beautiful thing to hear from people my age and from people younger, because it's like, oh, like deep down at our core, even though it seems like it on the surface, even though it seems like we can be unforgiving, and we can be unforgiving, we still value those aspects of change and forgiveness. So Iroh may be a blueprint for what young people want in an older mentor and what they wish boomers could be. He is someone who finds wisdom in many different places. He doesn't fall for the illusions of division. He's caring and has the capacity for change and forgiveness. He's deeply empathetic. He's loyal. He walks alongside the person he's mentoring rather than dispensing wisdom from an ivory tower. And he even has joy over simple things in life, like tea, which I think is another thing that young people wish that their mentors had. They wish that they had joy over simple things in the way that young people seem to. But even if Iroh is a blueprint for what we wish our mentors could be, I also think he's a blueprint for what we wish we could be. He's a blueprint for what we aspire to be. And that's where I take a lot of hope in the fact that young people like myself and like others have been so drawn to Uncle Iroh as a character, because I think the things that they see in him are deeply true, deeply spiritual, deeply wonderful things that we should all aspire to be. So that's Uncle Iroh. Man, I never even got to this tea. I'm sure that it's pretty cold by now, but I might as well sip it. Yeah, I didn't put any milk in, contrary to what you saw in the intro. So it needed some of that. But thank you so much for watching this video. I am just so grateful that people have been on board with the more rambly style of recent stuff. It's been such a joy putting together a new set for vibes. It's been fun. And even coming up with this video was really fun. It was a joy to revisit Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I'm like really grateful in a very sincere way for the discussion and joy around that over the summer of 2020. I think it was definitely one of the bright spots of that year, and it was truly a cultural moment that I'm grateful to have been a part of. If you'd like to check me out on Patreon, you can do that. I've had a lot of behind the scenes stuff on there, early videos and information and rambles and photos and videos about my current documentary that I'm working on, which is exciting. So that's a cool thing if you want to chip in a few bucks. And then, yeah, otherwise, if you made it to the end of this video, I would say comment your favorite Uncle Iroh quote in the comments below. It could be wise, it could be stupid, I don't care. It's awesome. I love this character, and I will be looking forward to seeing what y'all say. I think as I've been going forward with this channel, I've just been really grateful to see that it has become a place of healthy discourse and discussion and nuanced opinions. That's something that is so rare on the internet, and yet I've been really encouraged by my comments section and by the people who give their opinions in the comments, So I look forward to seeing what y'all say about this video, other things that you find admirable and aspirational and wish fulfillment about Uncle Iroh, And yeah, so thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. These are the things that people say at the end of these videos, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.